Hey everybody, it's Allison, the Holistic Homesteader, and today I'm going to talk to you about laying out a garden. So if you saw my last video about gardening, it was all about seeds and how to buy your seeds, where to source them from, what kinds of things to look for on the packs and in the descriptions, the logistics of really growing what you can eat for one, and what you can actually grow in terms of, you don't want to be growing something like a field of corn if you only have a 10 foot by 10 foot backyard. So being logical about what you're actually ordering. And I've heard the term chicken math. That's when these crazy chicken people, they go to the store for 6 little chicks and they come home with 30. It's chicken math, right? It just makes sense. Well, I'm kind of like that about seeds. It's seed math. And I always prefer to plant more when I'm actually starting the seeds, or planting when I'm starting them inside under grow lights, or if I'm planting them outside. I always plant more than you probably should, but then I go back through and I weed them out as needed. I would rather plant more and have to go through and weed them out and separate them and space them out than to not plant enough and be regretting it later. So in that last video, I told you how I wrote down all of the things that we eat and the things that I love to grow. Beets are not something that I eat on the regular, but I have a seed pack, so I do want to try growing them this year. I do like pickled beets and eggs. I do enjoy that. So if I'm the only one that eats them, that's okay. Same thing with kohlrabi. I absolutely love kohlrabi. Nobody in my family really does, but that was just something that my dad and I did when I was growing up. We grew kohlrabi and we would go to the garden and eat it right out of the garden. It was just one of my favorite things to eat. It was like eating a bag of Lay's potato chips with just a little bit of salt on it. Oh, it was so good. So there are some things that, I have on my list that maybe not my whole family likes, but I'm willing to grow for myself. So if you remember that list, it looked like this. And I talked about, how many of these, in terms of starting indoors in March, how many of each of these plants I need to make sure that I am planting in my garden. So ideally I'll be planting more than this. So what this means is, for example, this is broccoli. I have two different types of broccoli, and I want at least a dozen of each of the broccoli heads, because we just love broccoli and I need to have at least a dozen. And so that's what all these numbers are. I have, 2 strains of cauliflower. We don't eat as much cauliflower, so I only want to do 6 plants of each strain. Kohlrabi, I have 2 packs of that, so 6 of each. I could probably do more of that, honestly, but I don't want to be, sick of kohlrabi if I'm the only one eating it either, though. So this is my list. Now, what I did from here was, and you also see I made some notes. I'm going to need 4 trellises, 2 tires if we're going to do 1 tire for the carrots and 1 tire for the onions, like I talked about in that last video. Lawn fabric is what I like to use to keep weeds at bay. Excuse me. And then also some more stakes, some fence posts, because we're going to end up fencing our blueberry bushes and our grape arbor. We're going to end up fencing that in. So this is kind of like my Tractor Supply Rural King list over here. So what I did to lay out my garden, we have a dedicated garden area, and most people who garden, they do. So whether your garden is 10 foot by 10 foot, or like mine is probably, I don't even know, 70 foot by 40 foot or something like that, 60 foot by 30 foot, give or take. I'm not really sure. I've never really measured it. But it's a pretty big size garden. My garden doesn't really change from year to year. It's the same, in the same place, same size every year. That's how most people do it. You can do this method of garden layout, whether your garden is 5 foot by 5 foot raised little bed to, 100 foot by 100 foot gigantic, amazing garden. My first tip is, if you already had a garden, think about your garden last year. If your garden was rectangular, grab a sheet of blank paper. Here's your garden. Draw your garden on paper. Think back, you know, as gardeners, we remember where we planted what. Think back about it and put it down. Put it on paper. Okay, so I'm going to show you my 2021 garden layout. So this is what it looked like. So this is the same layout as, you know, these are the same kind of markers as this year. I have my compost up here. Up here in this corner are some dedicated items that really, they don't change, and it's a year-round kind of thing. My compost never changes. I have rhubarb growing up here, which, you know, you don't really touch rhubarb. I have asparagus. Again, you don't do anything with asparagus, you just let it do its thing. My garlic, this is my little garlic bed up here. I don't have any garlic up there right now, but last spring I definitely did. And then I did a harvest of garlic in the early summer. And then this is also where I like to put my peas, but I think that's where I've put them the last several years, and they haven't really done very well. I love to eat my peas fresh. I might get a couple of cups of peas that I can freeze, but mostly I'm just standing up in the garden and I'm shelling peas and eating them for breakfast. It's one of those things like kohlrabi. I'm usually the only one that eats it, and I just grow it for my own satisfaction, and I am a-okay with that. So my 2021 garden was actually the sparsest garden that I've done. And I think I was just kind of over it from, you know, being quarantined for so long and just being here in the house and on the property and not having anywhere to go or anything to do. I was just over it. And so I just wanted a really simple garden that I didn't have to think a lot about. And this is the layout that we came up with. So when you go through our gate, right in this area, I had rows. I had rows of celery, carrot, lettuce, onion, and up here, like I said, all of the stuff that was already established. So that was all of this area. I didn't have any kind of mulch or anything down, and it was a huge freaking mistake. This area here was probably like 12 foot by 30 foot or better. It was huge. It was a disaster. Nothing really grew very well here aside from my lettuce. It just was awful. So I'm definitely see you do this, because now I know, and I'm going to keep that in mind for this upcoming garden. After that, in this area too, I also had a section of herbs, and I forgot to add that in there, but I did have, between the onion and the tomatoes, I had a row of herbs. So these are all indicating plastic or lawn fabric, whatever I had on hand. I just wanted to keep as much of the weeds down as possible. So on each one of these, I grew something. On this one, I grew tomatoes, and I also had marigolds interspersed just to keep the bugs off of my tomatoes, like the hornwood caterpillar and stuff like that. You don't want those guys on there, and marigolds will help deter. On this one, I had peppers, and I probably had 24 pepper plants, you know, spaced out throughout there, and that was actually a pretty good spacing of them. This area was approximately 6 foot by, like I said, what did I say, 30 foot here? That's probably about right. So they were pretty big areas to have 24 peppers. On this one, I had my squash. I had one squash plant, and then I had some cucumber and some pumpkin. And then on the far one, I had it prepped and ready, but I didn't get to even plant anything on it. I was just so over it. In 2020 and 2019, actually it was in 2019, I believe, we grew corn up here in this section. And this area is very, very rocky. It's very clay heavy, and the corn didn't grow very well. So we were kind of like, we don't really know if we want to do that again. So I've tried to grow pumpkin, was what I grew up here in 2020, I'm pretty sure. And that didn't really work out very well either. So last year in 2021, I just let this go to weeds. And that was a huge mistake because I forget what the weed was that took over, but it was a nice little weed. It wasn't like harmful in any way, but it got to be like 2 foot tall and just a thick little Amazonian jungle of weeds up there. And you couldn't really walk through it or anything because, you know, I don't really want to step on a snake if at all possible. So that was my garden for 2021. Now, keeping the same format, because I know that this is exactly the same size of my garden, I took another piece of paper and I wrote down, you know, this stuff is all the same. My gate is still going to be in the same place. This is a walkway. Oh, I don't think I talked about my beans. In between the lawn fabric, I left about probably a 10-inch wide space between each sheet. And every single one of those, I planted beans, either yellow beans or green beans. And that actually worked out really well. That was the smartest thing that I did for the garden, because then all of this area here was weed free. And that worked out really nicely. And then my walkway was okay too, because I was able to weed eat this. But to weed eat up through here was a pain in the butt because I had too many plants everywhere. Stuff was getting chopped off. It was a mess. So I don't want to do that again. So I took another sheet of paper and keeping this sheet of paper in mind, and knowing, you know, I'm going to need trellises, I'm going to need a big area for these items, I'm going to need, you know, an area probably for all of this stuff on one area together. I'll need an area for peppers, an area for tomatoes. I'm going to try onions and carrots in a tire, keeping all that in mind and keeping last year's garden in mind. This is the hopeful garden for 2022. So here's my gate. Anything shaded is I'm going to try to use bark. We have a trucking company. We're in the lumber industry. We deal with tree bark a lot. I'm hoping we can bring tree bark home and I can do bark as a weed barrier here in between all of these things. So there's my gate. Up here is my dedicated stuff, like I said before, my garlic patch, my compost, my asparagus and rhubarb. That's all staying put. Here is where I'm going to do my sandy soil-filled tires. We're going to use 2 tires from an old John Deere tractor. We're going to fill them with soil and with sand, lots of sand, because both of those items love a sandy soil. And we are going to plant those items in tires. Now, if there's an area left over, which I'm guessing that there will be, you know, because I'm just guesstimating sizes. This is just a rough estimate. This isn't like this is final and this is an exact blueprint and this is how it has to be. This is a good visual for how I'm hoping that it goes and how I should be able to fit everything I want to grow into one garden. And how much of it too, right? Because a lot of this is just space wise. I need a large area to grow some of these things. So if I have room left over down here by the gate, I want to have a little wildflower patch just for pollinators and stuff like that. Something I'm hoping I don't have to really maintain. So down from here, I'm hoping I have room for some celery. I'm going to try to do my peas here. I have a bush type pea, not a vining pea, so I'm going to use this area for peas. Then down through here are where I'm going to use my trellises. And like I said in my last video, I want my trellises to be at more of a 45-degree angle with lettuce underneath. So I have 3 strains of cucumber that I want to try to grow, all eating fresh. I don't pickle any cucumbers. We don't eat enough cucumber in here for me to really want to do that. And I've tried it in the past and I didn't really like any of the recipes, so that also plays a factor. If you hear the noise in the background, Harper's outside riding a dune buggy, so that's what you're hearing growling outside. I'm also going to try to grow a strain of loofah. I love to use loofah as an exfoliator in the shower. They grow as a vine, and that'll be on the 4th trellis. So that'll all be as you go through the gate. From there, same as last year, I'm going to have alternating rows of beans in between lawn fabric. So I have the same concept in mind as last year, but I'm not going to have anything placed in the same area of soil. So the year before, I didn't have anything at all over here, but next year I'm hoping to do my, what do I have here? My cantaloupe, watermelon, and pumpkin on this far side. And I'm going to take it the whole way up. So if you remember from the year before, I didn't have anything up there. I just had all those weeds. So I'm going to try to take the rows the whole way up. And at the very top, I want to try to do a row of sunflowers and calendula too, right along the fence. From there, this area will be all my peppers. So that'll take up this whole area. I'll be able to space them out really well. Down here at the end of these rows, I'm going to have 3 different types of squash. So one will be a regular yellow squash, one will be a zucchini, and then one will be butternut squash. And I'll just have one of each of those plants, one at the base of these. On this one, I have tomatoes and marigolds, and it'll go the whole length. That's all that'll be here, with my beans in between each row to act as weed control. So now I'm hoping all of this area here will be weed free. This, honestly, I'm hoping that is the way that it goes. One year, Brian and I, we put bark on the whole, we had rows vertically with no fabric whatsoever, just row after row after row after row. And we barked that entire garden with wheelbarrows and pitchforks, and it was so much work, but my goodness, it was the most beautiful garden I have ever seen. If I have pictures of that, I'll try to throw them up at the end, but yeah, it was my favorite garden. So hopefully this year coming up will be just as pretty. So we have our tomatoes and marigolds. These beans are going to get planted 1 week at a time. So I'll plant this row, probably I'll plant this row first, and then I'll wait a week and I'll plant this row. I'll wait a week, I'll plant this row. And that way I can succession plant them, and I'm not just getting a ton of beans all at the same time. I'll be getting beans, you know, throughout the whole month of August, hopefully. So finally, this last row here is where I plan to put my broccoli and cauliflower up here at the top, my beets, and my kohlrabi. So again, this is just a rough estimate, but if you were to compare what is where, nothing is in the same spot. Like my peppers are not in the same spot as the year before. My pumpkins are not, my tomatoes are not. Those are the most important things, because like I talked about in that previous video, a lot of plants, they develop a disease. You can prevent that by having high quality soil that is healthy and rich in minerals, and yeah, you can also prevent that by rotating year to year. So that's what we have done here. This is what I'm hoping to achieve. So like I said on this other sheet, there are things that I know I'm going to need to get, and I might have some of this in my shed. I've got to check to see what I have and what I still need to get, or what we can make instead. Instead of like buying trellises, I have a feeling we're just going to frame out a trellis and use old chicken wire and staple it on there, and then use props, wooden props, you know, to hold it up to plant the lettuce. And then we can lift it up and down or off, or however we need to do it. But we're sure as heck not going to be spending a bunch of money on stuff. I can tell you that. So like I said, you can do this with any size garden. I did mine on a real large scale. You can do yours on a real small scale, or even if you have just a back patio and you just have 12 containers, lay your containers out on paper and think about, what to plant in each container and how it'll need to grow. A tomato might need a cage. A cucumber can grow on a back deck and it needs a trellis. Have something for it to grow up. You can grow watermelon, cantaloupe, pumpkin. You can grow all of those in containers like that on a back deck. Take a lot of water, but you could do it. You can use things like bone meal or blood meal to provide nutrients to the soil as the plant were to grow in the container. But you can do those kinds of things in containers. Just think about what you're working with and how much sun it needs, how much space it needs, how you can help it grow. And yeah, just lay it out on paper and see what kind of stuff you're going to need, and just prepare ahead of time, because the more prepared you are for your garden, no matter if it's a container garden or if it's a 100-foot by 100-foot garden, the more prepared you are for what is needing to happen, the easier this is going to be on you when you actually go to do it. And then hopefully that'll transfer through, a good yield of produce as summer goes on. So there we have it, everybody. I thank you so much for commenting and for subscribing and for liking my content. I appreciate you so very much. We'll see you next time when I show you how to start your seeds. Okay, everybody, bye.